Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Hare Krishna, I'd like to welcome everyone for today's discussion on the importance of reading Srila Prabhupada's books every day in the lives of devotees for their personal spiritual advancement and for the progress of the International Society of Krishna Consciousness. Today it is our great honor and privilege to have with us one of our very senior members of ISKCON, who is also a governing body commissioner, His Holiness Kavicandra Maharaj. Kavicandra Maharaj is a disciple of Srila Prabhupada, has been associated with the movement for many, many decades, and Maharaj travels and preaches all over the world. Maharaj, welcome to this discussion.
Thank you very much. It's a very important discussion. We always try to stress it,
Maharaj, do you recollect your first interaction or encounter with Srila Prabhupada's books?
I think it was maybe the first time I went to the temple. I got an Ishopanishad. And I think I'd read a little back to Godhead before that. But when I got back to where I was residing, I was reading that Ishopanishad. As far as I can remember, I didn't sleep. I just read it all night. I was in ecstasy. I never, I had been reading so many books all my life, and I got to the point where I could never finish a book. I thought they're all the same. But this one was different. So I just kept reading and reading and reading, and I think however long it took me, I read the whole book.
Is there something from your first reading that really did attract your heart? Obviously, I mean, you were reading with non-stop overnight. Everything must be ecstatic, as you just described.
Yeah,
but,
I don't remember.
Any first impressions?
I don't remember any exact details. It just was like, so, it's like the first time you do kirtan, what can you say? I just remember I especially liked the Sanskrit, which I don't think I'd ever heard of before, but I liked that language, because it's written in Roman letters, and I like that. That's what I remember the most about that first reading.
And Maharaj, which year was this? Do you remember broadly how many years back this happened?
Either the end of 70 or the very beginning of 71.
Maharaj, what was the culture in ISKCON at that point in time with respect to reading Prabhupada's books regularly every day amongst the devotees?
Well, I joined as a small temple. There was like 5 brahmacharis there. And we had nectar devotion and teachings of Lord Chaitanya. And Bhagavad Gita wasn't available. There were a few chapters that were printed from the second canto of the paperback. We would read, I think, both nectar devotion and Chaitanya Charitamrita every evening, and Bhagavad Gita. And we read a lot. And had some kind of class in the morning. I don't remember details. I remember, though, the nectar devotion I especially remember, and teachings of Lord Chaitanya. So at that temple, they like to read. And we had Krishna book also. So one devotee named Narada Muni, he was my savior. He was the first devotee I saw in Harinam. And he would always just come up from behind or something and start telling stories from the Krishna book. So it really, enlivened me to want to read that book also.
Well, the name and the personality sound very similar to what we read in Bhagavatam.
Yeah.
that he always felt enlivened, and he enlivened everybody else to hear about Krishna.
He would always just recite like practically by memory. Then I remember, I don't know it was the first time, but I was at the Sunday program, and they had the Krishna book. I think the second volume had just come. And I was looking at the cover. That was that, I don't know if you ever seen that book, but it had a Dwarkadish, a very close-up of Dwarkadish, Dwarkadish. And it was so effulgent. So I was thinking that book must, that looks like solid gold. I could never afford that book, I really wanted to have it, but I thought I could never. It would be way too expensive. But then somehow or other I got one. And the same thing, I just kept reading it without anybody came to talk to me. I just read out loud the Krishna book. So that book really did the job.
And Maharaj, although you have a very busy schedule of traveling, preaching, do you still read and remain in touch with Srila Prabhupada's books over the years?
Yeah, I do. There's different periods, but sometimes the traveling's very advantageous, like long flights. I finally, it's a little hard to concentrate on flights, but on long train rides, like in China, and just read the whole time. It's wonderful. Get a lot of chance like that. And that's important. Otherwise, this internet age, we get into reading a little bit here, a little bit there, and jumping all over the place. But reading the book is very important.
Maharaj, to inspire all of us, could you share with us what impact reading Prabhupada's transcendental books on a regular basis has had on your personal spiritual life?
I don't think I'd have a spiritual life without it. It's just because we all, we're completely dependent on Srila Prabhupada. And, devotees always ask about what is your experience with Prabhupada. My experience is reading his books, other than, hearing lectures. And when I was in the place where Prabhupada was, the only associate I got was the morning Bhagavatam class. Couple morning walks here and there. So, but the books were always the connection. It's, we heard so many times the books are better than I am. The Prabhupada said that. And he did say that. And he explains it in a few places I was reading recently in Chaitanya Charitamrita. Because the book is available for a long time in the future. It's available to any number of people, any place in the world at the same time. And Prabhupada put his best time of the day into the books. He said that the purports are his personal ecstasies. That's our connection with Prabhupada. So without that, we'd be nowhere. I would be nowhere anyway. I don't have any particular assets, education, or talents or anything. But if I can just repeat, like I had experienced when I was first in the temple. Now I would listen to the devotees preach, and I was thinking, boy, I wish I could talk like that. It's so wonderful how they're talking. And I was not saying much. And then, I don't know, somehow I read Bhagavad Gita. I guess there was one copy in the temple or something. And it wasn't, at that time, wasn't in print. And somebody was asking a question, and there was kind of some silence. And I said, well, the Bhagavad Gita says, and I quoted whatever I read in the Bhagavad Gita. And I think it was Narada Muni, it might have been one of the other devotees. And they just started, oh, that's so wonderful. You spoke so beautifully. It's so great. I said, all I did was just say what I read in the book. It's no big deal. And no, it's so wonderful. So I thought, okay, I better do this. I'll stick to this. This is the project. So yes. I try to do that, Of course, now we have a lot of access to Prabhupada's lectures, so I listen to them a lot also.
Well,
And
it reminds me
recently,
of the phrase Maharaj, where it says that Srila Prabhupada and his books are the wish-fulfilling trees,
yeah,
kalpatarus. They will fulfill our desire. It seems, at least in this instance, immediately your wish to please Prabhupada manifested through his Vani of the books.
and just I was going to recall a few stories, not my personal, but what I witnessed. The heyday of my life was in the Chicago airport when we were distributing books there. And that was in 1974 when the book distribution was really big. So there were people in different airports. We experienced sometimes security guards, police that would harass the devotees, or even the air hostesses. They would think you people are just bothering customers. And then one policeman, I can't remember which airport, but he was especially harassing devotees. And then one day he came and said, "I read your book, and I'm never going to bother you people again." And that happened. Yeah, that happened to some of the air hostesses also, because people would leave the book on the plane or something, for whatever reason, forget it. I've forgotten things on airplanes. And so some of them started reading the books and then started coming and asking for more books. So we had that experience. Prabhupada had to, and anytime we had legal trouble or anything, tell the judge to read all the books. And sometimes they did read something, and then they understand what we're all about. And for us to understand, we need that constant connection. I listened to Giriraj Swami and a few others. I heard Yadanandan Swami. They were giving the same quotes. And how Prabhupada was saying everyone should read the books. We need that connection with Prabhupada and the parampara. It's association. I tell people we don't read for knowledge. Really, that's automatic. It's a subordinate thing. But we read just for association of Prabhupada. I didn't find I was going to look it up, but there's early in the first canto, Prabhupada says, Narada Muni has kindly appeared on the pages of this book. Mm-hmm. So we get all this association by reading Prabhupada's books. Narada Muni and Vasudev, Sukadev, and especially Prabhupada. So
it's this association which nurtures our spiritual life, Maharaj, with devotees and Prabhupada. Maharaj, you have now touched upon a very, very important point for us, which is what should be one's mood. And you mentioned that knowledge may come automatically. Could you please elaborate on what is the healthy, proper mood to approach transcendental literature and Srila Prabhupada's books? And what could also be some unhealthy ways of approaching these transcendental books?
Well, what I've been reading lately, due to this lockup, the devotees in Israel, they said, "Can you give a class every day?" So I started reading Chaitanya Charitamrita. So we finished the Madhya Lila and the Ancha Lila and one chapter of Adi Lila so far. And that's with the Russian translation. It's like, it's pretty nectarine. But this word submissive hearing, it just comes up again and again and again. Even in the slokas, and especially in the purports. Submissive, like we say, be like a child and empty your mind. The Buddhists say open mind. It's just for hearing. If we just open-minded, we're just hearing and relishing it. That I think that seems to me to be the best. Just relishing the association of all these personalities and hearing, all these great devotees, these great pastimes. And then when we do that, when we go to talk about it, we'll automatically remember. We automatically get knowledge. I Jnana Chairagya Vairagyam, right? It's automatically when you, Vasudeva Bhagavati, Bhakti Yoga Prayojita. You automatically get knowledge and renunciation by Bhakti Yoga, and just reading, hearing submissively is Bhakti Yoga. It's the essence of it. Hearing and chanting. We can't chant unless we hear. So if we want to preach, then we have to hear the philosophy so we know what it's all about.
Yes, Maharaj.
And
Maharaj, you just mentioned that you were in Israel, you are conducting classes, and you mentioned you've gone through the whole Madhya Leela, the whole Ante Leela, and you're on Adi Leela. So it must be, you must be reading a lot or sharing a lot with the devotees. Is it happening every day, every week, something like that?
Almost every day, like not today, because I have another meeting, but about 2 hours every day, almost every day. But we're mostly just reading. I'm not saying much else. Every once in a while I give a little comment, but it's too relishable. Especially the Ansha Leela, there's just practically no way to comment on it. It's just so transcendental. But the devotees really like it. And started out with more, then they all started going back to work. But now more are coming again. But it's recorded and it goes on YouTube and everything. So anyway, it's a completely relishable activity. I get really attached to it.
Maharaj, is this something, what is the experience of the devotees there in that you're speaking to? There must be other occasions where they've not had the opportunity to hear so much or read so much versus now in the lockdown. Just reading, as you said, Prabhupada's books and sharing what's written. Can you sort of give us some comparison of how much effect it has amongst the devotees, and if they have any appreciation for this process?
Well, they must, because they keep coming every day. And I keep coming, and they keep saying, I ask for comments or questions, they just say thank you, because somehow or other, like myself, it's very easy to think, well, I'll read later today or something. But if I'm supposed to be there at this time, I just make my day around this now. Japa in the morning, and then there's other things come and go.
Well, Maharaj, this week that we celebrated now.
I picked out a few slokas and stuff from the Chaitanya Charitamrita.
Yes.
The author says, I request my Vaishnava readers to read and hear with rapt attention this narration of Chaitanya Charitamrita as inculcated in the revealed scriptures. Rapt attention. Ekeha Kurunandana. What is it? One pointed attention, the Bhagavatam says.
Yes.
That's the thing. And just, okay, let's just hear this and put aside any kind of, the same way we're supposed to be chanting. That's in the Adi Leela, first chapter 31. Then 7th chapter, Lord Chaitanya's spiritual master instructed him, therefore, that one must read Srimad Bhagavatam regularly and with scrutiny to gradually become attached to chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. That's our ultimate goal, to be attached to chanting. And how to do it, we get that question a lot, how can I get this? And the answers are always there. So then there's another purport where Prabhupada says, when we speak of hearing and chanting, it means that not only one should chant and hear the holy name of the Lord as Ram, Krishna, or systematically the 16 names, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. But one should also read and hear the Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam in the association of devotees. And that's from the Bhagavatam purport 2.2.30. There's another one from the 4th canon. I remember this one really hit me when I first read it. That we had a special mercy in those days that the books were just coming out like we never seen them before, and the Bhagavatam was coming. Everyone, we'd get a new volume and just read it and then distribute it. But a pure devotee who was executing the different processes of devotional service may be situated in the transcendental position, being completely absorbed in Krishna consciousness. But even he, while discharging devotional service, must hear, read, and induce others to hear about the character and life of Prithu Maharaj. This came on back in those Chicago airport days and really gave us a lot of energy. And another experience I had, that airport was a grueling physical labor. We were carrying really heavy bags. Sometimes we put 30 Bhagavatams in one bag and carry it, because sometimes we could distribute them very fast, sometimes not. So some get really tired, and we were crazy. We're leaving the temple at 6 in the morning and quitting Sankirtan at 6 in the evening, except on some weekends, and staying out much later. So we would sit down and read. And I remember one time I sat down to read the Chaitanya Charitamrita, which we just got, so we hadn't really read it before. And I read that verse about it's the duty of every man to spread Krishna. I can't remember exactly the famous verse. I was reading that, and all of a sudden just jumped up, and just distribute like crazy. So I got that habit. Just in Japan, I'd carry a so many number of books, and every time I went to get more, I would just sit down and read, for 10 or 15 minutes. And then my whole Sankirtan went much better. To stay connected, know what we're doing out there, why we want to give this to people. So one must hear, read, and induce others to hear. Then another one, it says, it's also from the 4th canto, same chapter, 23. The word Shravayat, mentioned in the previous verse, indicates that one should not only read for himself, but should also induce others to read and hear. So the previous one was an actual sloka from the Bhagavatam. This is the purport. That is called preaching. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu recommended this practice, Yade Deka Tade Deka Kaha Krishna Upadesh. Whoever you meet, simply talk with him about the instructions given by Krishna, or tell him of narrations about Krishna. So of course we have to read to be able to do that.
Yes.
Isn't it? Because
yes,
whatever.
Maharaj, absolutely.
Whatever
Maharaj, you will be pleased to know what we've done at the Ministry of Education. We've actually prepared a presentation which we're going to share with the devotees, which includes Prabhupada's words from purports, from verses, where Prabhupada is specifically mentioning about reading his books regularly, every day, emphasizing on reading his books. So we'll be sharing that. It's very nice. It's nicely done. It's a simple effort, but nicely done with Prabhupada's picture, nice quotes, which devotees can refer to, enthuse every day. Maharaj, I wanted to ask you a question on this point when you mentioned that when the book would just come out, and when the Chaitanya Charitamrita was coming out and you got the new book, sometimes devotees have this expression that we've already read this. We've read Bhagavad Gita, we've read it one time, we've read Srimad Bhagavatam. We can see from your personality that they've remained ever fresh. What is the difference in consciousness which allows us to let them remain ever fresh for Srila Prabhupada, as Prabhupada said, that he lives forever? What must one do to have this kind of a proper attitude towards the books of Srila Prabhupada?
I have no idea except it's mercy, But I just have another purport here from the 7th canto. We should hear again and again. There is no question of stopping, even if one has read these topics many times. You should go on reading again and again, because Bhagavad Gita, the words spoken by Krishna and spoken by Krishna's devotees about Krishna, are amritam, nectar. The more one drinks this and more nectar, the more he advances his spiritual life, eternal life. That's 7:14:3-4 purport. So it's, we hear that a lot, but I was, like sometimes trying to learn Bhagavad Gita slokas, and I read the same chapter a lot. It just gets better and better. I was always amazed at, of course, one factor is our memories aren't that good, you know, so we're always finding new stuff. I used to teach reading before when I was just out of high school, speed reading. We'd give people a test, you know, and it was a multiple choice, like a really simple test. Most people could barely get 40% on just a short reading. So even if we read the same thing over and over again, and that's what everybody's doing anyway, they think it's new, but the news, so-called news, is nothing new, it's all old. And it's the same thing. Benjamin Franklin said he started the first newspaper in America. He said it's the same every day, you just change the names and the dates. Otherwise, it's the same thing.
So true. So
somebody
true,
won, somebody lost, you know, what was the score? The numbers are different, but it's the same thing over and over again. But the Krishna, it's nectar, and it just gets better and better. You have more and more appreciation and realization. So it's special mercy. I don't know. For me, I don't have any other qualification. But,
we, of course, have to become a recipient of that mercy, Maharaj. And it seems like it's a divine coincidence that the Bhagavatam verse that you just quoted sort of answers the question. Just read again and again, and that's how one becomes qualified.
Again and again.
Yes.
One should read these topics many times because it's so deep, you know. It's just like you know, it's really amazing, deep. So,
Maharaj, I wanted to ask you a slightly related question, but on a slightly different track, which is, we talked about the importance of reading in our personal lives for cultivating our Krishna consciousness. What about managerial responsibilities, leaders, the society itself, the significance of reading, on the impact of it on International Society of Krishna Consciousness? What would your message be to the leaders who often get very busy with services and naturally so have very little time left? Any advice, any directions, tips on how what must they do to be able to sustain the reading?
well, I read some different, you know, motivational speakers, and they talk about these these maha businessmen, you know, they read so many books, they say. These guys that are managing, you know, multinational corporations, they read so many books, of course, books about their particular work, but they read so much. So they just know it's valuable. They have to constantly learn. So, and for us, you know, if we're managing, but we lose track of Prabhupada, and like the Prithu Maharaj tells you all about how to manage that section. So we all have to make time. That's why Prabhupada made the morning schedule. At least we read, you know, every morning one verse. It's supposed to be every evening also. But that we have to understand, just like we chant. I heard, I don't know if it was Giriraj Maharaj or somebody, and when you talk to him, or was Gopal Bhatta was talking, that we should take this, you know, practically like that we have to chant 16 rounds. It's a vow. We don't take a vow that I will read so much every day, but we should think of it like that. If we want, like it said that previous quote I gave, in order to chant, we need to read. We need to connect. Prabhupada said his purports were offenseless chanting. So then otherwise we won't know how to deal with devotees as leaders. We'll just be managers. And we need leaders who care about the soul, and, you know, leaders can be managers, but managers not necessarily a leader. So we have to be careful. You know, it's dangerous, but we have to force ourselves. Okay.
You touched upon this point of including this as a vow, as part of our sadhana. It's how important it is. Could you share a little bit more?
Well, we have to make it a priority, that we're going to read every day. I know I had times when practically the only reading was, the morning class. When I was doing book distribution, we'd always take time to read in between, even just a few minutes. But it's pleasing to Prabhupada. There's a letter here. He said, I'm very pleased that you were inclined to read and study our books with such seriousness. Thank you very much. So, that's one reason to read. Not that you just distribute, but neglect reading them yourself. Always read them, especially Krishna book. Every time you have a spare moment, you should read. This will help you advance in Krishna consciousness and will give you the ability to convince others also. The letter to trade us. We're still distributing books. And I heard about one Maharaja, I forget her name. She was in New Vrindavan. She's the one who ended up getting killed in Africa. And she was very, very busy with deities and really hard work. And it said she used to keep books, like open books everywhere. Every table in the house, she had a book open. So she could always read a few minutes or something, whatever else she was doing. It was a good idea. Of course, now we have electronic media, but we have to open it, So there's so many other things are there. So, but it's like everything else. We have to make the effort to take the time. And then, of course, there's, we do have the spoken books now. Like I know one devotee, he's fluent in a few languages, three or four languages, but he can't read very good in any of them. Businessman, but then he got all these, recordings, the recorded books, and he's really relishes it. Well, because he drives a lot, and he just listens to the books. So we have all that facility. Something else we can listen. In the shower, we can listen, during so many other times of the day, if we take advantage of that opportunity. And that should inspire us to read more also.
So if we can somehow or the other make this a priority part of our daily life to read, Maharaj, you've suggested there are many ways now, using technology or otherwise, some good habits can be formed to read every day. Maharaj, of course, within ISKCON, Srila Prabhupada is our preeminent Shiksha Guru, and some of the interviews, I think the one that you're referring to, conducted with Giriraj Maharaj and Gopal Bhatta Prabhu, was also on that spirit. So it seems very, very important from what we're hearing from you, that in order to really appreciate the fact that Srila Prabhupada is a preeminent Shiksha Guru, we must, take Shiksha, which will come through his books. Maharaj, would you like to give any parting message to the devotees in ISKCON with respect to this daily reading of Srila Prabhupada's books?
Well, one thing is if you're preaching, if you're teaching, that gives you great inspiration to read. So you have something to, and if you want to remember something, you want to understand something, the scientific studies show the best way is to teach it, to repeat, whether it's to one person, whether it's to your children, to anyone you meet, or to an audience of thousands if you're some kind of a big shot, but try to repeat what you hear, even to yourself, So then we can realize it. But, Prabhupada read his own books. Many of his servants had that experience of finding him reading his own book. One time he called Hridayananda Maharaj, and the devotee went running, Prabhupada wants to see you, Prabhupada wants to see you, and he came running, and Prabhupada was reading Krishna book. And he came in and Prabhupada said, have you read this book? And he said, yes, Prabhupada, it's very good, isn't it? And he said, I want to see what Krishna has written. And he said that over and over again. If you just read this Bhagavad Gita, if you just read Nectar Devotion, you can become a Krishna conscious person. You know, so I hope, you know, how else can, you know, there's many people preaching, and now there's more and more so-called spiritual movements. There's more and more, you know, branches of everything. How do we know if someone's representing Prabhupada unless we know what Prabhupada said?
Yes, Maharaj. Yes. I think submissive hearing, submissive attitude, it all develops, as you've just so nicely described, by reading Prabhupada's books. And we will all try to take inspiration from your words, Maharaj, and read every day.
Many devotees now in this internet age have these reading groups. So they meet, you know, I don't know, every day or some days at a certain time, and they just read for a half hour or whatever time they have. And that way they can get together without having to go someplace. They can do it, you know, whenever their time is available. And they really like that. Just read and listen to other people read.
Yes.
Reading out loud, so many things.
And Maharaj, we are actually hearing experiences from devotees. You know, we at the ministry also, we started around March and April, we started to reach out to devotees, encouraging them, requesting them. And we're hearing very positive feedback where devotees feel that this whole troubled period sort of has actually turned the other way around in many ways, at least for spiritual lives, just to have the kind of association with Srila Prabhupada's books that you just described, like reading with Vaishnavas every day. Maharaj, we are very, very grateful for your time today, to encouraging us to read every day.
It gives me a chance to speak. You know. It's always good to have somebody wanting you to talk about Krishna. There's nothing more beneficial to meet someone that wants to hear about Krishna, about Prabhupada and the books.
Yes, Maharaj. And during this week, Maharaj, during this International Shravanam week, we are making a concentrated effort around the centers and temples in ISKCON, especially in connection with the leaders, that they must organize programs, reading groups, to encourage communities, congregations to read every day. So we seek your blessings, Maharaj. That
I think that I can do that. I'm trying to tell everybody.
Yes, Maharaj. Yes, and we're trying to follow in your footsteps. Thank you so much for your association, Maharaj. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyevacha patitanam pavnebhyo vaishnavibhyo namo namah. Srila Prabhupada's transcendental books ki jai.
By reading his books, we can pay back Prabhupada for how much effort he put in to produce the books. Inconceivable, miraculous accomplishment. And, you know, we can't ever pay back, but by reading them and sharing them, and we can do whatever we can. Thank you very much.
We will try to express our gratitude on that note exactly the same way, to please Prabhupada, as Maharaj you instructed, by reading his books and pay back for all his loving benedictions on us. Thank you, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna. Thank
Hare Krishna, Maharaj. Thank you for your time.
Gauranga.
Gauranga.
Chaitanya Charitamrita ki jai.
Hare Krishna.